Once upon a moonlit sea, in a time when the stars seemed to twinkle just a little bit closer to Earth, the world experienced the elusive yet daring tales of the pirates during the Golden Age. Imagine, if you will, a balmy breeze carrying the scent of salt and adventure, gently whistling through the rigging of a wooden ship that creaked as if it was whispering secrets of old. Settle into your cozy hammock of thoughts as we sail into this vivid world, one where pirates were the true masters of ceremonies on the high seas. Tales of life's great buffet are often scattered like the crumbs of a hearty ship's biscuit on a well-trodden deck. Speaking of decks, life on board a pirate ship barely measured up to the romanticized swashbuckling legends often spun in hushed tones. There was definitely more porridge than portvilles of peril at every meal, more "where's my trousers" than treasure maps sticky with X marks. The infamous Jolly Roger might appear menacing at the top of the mast, but beneath those black flags were sailors simply trying to avoid scurvy with the help of suspect citrus when they could find it. A pirate's day started with the call of the gulls, a natural alarm clock that never seemed to fail. Breakfast was a grand affair of hardtack. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a diet cracker, only tougher on the teeth. Rum, of course, was served at all hours, not to fuel debauchery, but because the water quickly became little more than soup of questionable microbial life as voyages grew long. Pirates, after all, deserved a small slice of tropical festivity, even if it came pickled in alcohol. Navigating the seas without modern GPS required a knack for reading the stars, much like tracing out a celestial connect the dots. Pirates, while not often mistaken for Oxford scholars, commanded a surprising array of skills, including celestial navigation, grappling hook acrobatics, and the art of the well-timed retreat, often called a tactical withdrawal among professionals. Pirate attire was less about fashion and more about practicality, albeit with a flair for the disheveled. The modern-day messy bun owes much of its origins to the style techniques pioneered by the Golden Age pirate, who never met a comb he liked. The wardrobe itself was an eclectic collection of whatever could be appropriated without asking too many polite questions. A pair of pilfered boots. Perfect. That slightly singed hat from a near brush with cannon fire. A personal favorite. And speaking of cannon fire, let's pause to appreciate that the sound of a cannon being primed was essentially the era's version of an alarm that screamed, "Brace yourself." Sleep often came in shifts and snatches, depending on whether you were on the lookout for merchant ships or simply trying to catch some Z's amid the harmonized snoring of a dozen pirates leaning against barrels. Underneath their bedazzled exterior, pirates were in many ways just like anyone who ever had to make do with a slightly lumpy mattress or a pillow that's seen better days. Their camaraderie was woven into every knot of the ropes they hauled and every raucous sea shanty they bellowed. Each line was a testament to their shared dreams and perilous pursuits, strung together with humor and the undying hope that maybe, just maybe, the next treasure would be the last one they'd need. So, as the lanterns flicker low and the calming sway of the ocean rocks your inner mind to slumber, remember the pirates not just as legends, but as fellow seekers of freedom in whatever form it came. If these stories help you drift off, please subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world to me. And before you fully fade into dreamland, I would love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there, as we glide ever so gently away from this night's narrative dock. Let's keep the sails unfurled for the next part of our journey, where the tales grow even richer and the stars continue to guide these dream-laden adventures onward. Nestle under the plush covers of your imagination and sail with me back into the azure waves of the 17th century Caribbean, where the sea is both a highway and a hideaway. Tonight, we unfurl the parchment of history to share the salty secrets of what life was truly like for a pirate in their reputed Golden Age, a time when daring adventurers painted the ocean red with romance, and occasionally, real blood. While you drift off, allow me to guide you gently through these tales of yore. Long before cruise liners and sunburnt tourists were a thing, the Caribbean islands were an old-world canvas vividly etched with emerald coasts and swashbuckling tales. It was a time when the notion of a 9-to-5 job was utterly absent, except perhaps for the concept of 9 bells signaling your watch was over, and hopefully you weren't late to catch the evening grog ration. Now, you might think that life as a pirate was an escapade of endless adventures peppered with treasure hunts and map reading. Well, think again, my sleepy sailor. Much of a pirate's daily routine was, dare I say, mundane. Imagine hanging out with a bunch of unruly accomplices, stuck on a floating bobber of timber with no technology to swipe away the boredom. A pirate ship was basically a drifting wooden box of personalities, with the occasional treasure more of an afterthought than an everyday finding. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves and let the salty dogma seep into our dreamy timelines. The average pirate's wardrobe, it seemed, was sponsored chiefly by an old-style second-hand store. Linen shirts were practical partners against the sun's brazen kiss, but they hardly screamed haute couture. Laundry day meant dunking your shirt in a barrel of seawater and waving it defiantly at the sun until it dried into the crisp texture of seaweed. Even their cuisine, the haute cuisine of biscuit and rum. Not that crusty variation your grandmother saves for special occasions. Imagine instead a hard round called hard tack, which made even the boldest pirate question the value of their dental insurance. These so-called biscuits were notoriously inedible, often doubling up as paperweights during shipboard gaming sessions. Rum, meanwhile, became a pirate's ambrosia, transforming illusions of the open sea into dreams of hidden riches and glorious escapes. Aboard the ship, boundaries as well as barnacles were rigid. Each pirate had a specific role, much like a poorly executed dance troupe. From the astute quartermaster to the sharp-tongued boatswain, with perhaps an actual parrot overseeing all, order was maintained with a crude yet effective hierarchy, not typically what one envisions when picturing anarchists of the sea. The captain, of course, was the head honcho, voted into power by his scaly crew, and possessing authority that was only slightly less impermanent than the morning fog. Imagine, if you will, that the role of a captain was as stable as a Jenga tower in a hurricane, lasting as long as the winds were frequent and the scuffles minimal. Yet, in negotiations or battle, the captain's charisma was invaluable as the voice that deterred foes and soothed his crew, except on those days when his own vocal cords were hoarse from salty weather and excessive rum-inspired serenades. The famed pirate's golden earring was not just an adornment to catch the sun's reflective glare. Many believed it was a prudent investment, ensuring funds for a befitting afterlife should a watery grave beckon, a macabre savings plan if ever there was one. In quieter moments, sailors hemmed and hawed about islands of treasure, mapping imagined journeys in their minds, retelling old tales of Captain Kidd and the clandestine caverns of Tortuga. Such was the chimeric life of our maritime marauders, filled with equal parts adventure and monotony, fortune and uncertainty. As the moon's silvery beams cast a shimmering lull on the sea, these tales whisper on the breeze, a melodic lullaby coaxing you into the embrace of dreams. For in dreams, every horizon holds a secret and the promise of another day's adventure. As you sail off into your own slumber, remember there are more oceans of stories yet unfurled. Picture yourself adrift on the azure waves of the Caribbean Sea, a time when parrots were as common as pesky mosquitoes, and the whispering winds carried tales of buried treasures rather than the latest celebrity scandals. Yes, my dear sleeper, it's the golden age of piracy, a time when the seas were a playground for daring rogues, questionable hygiene practices, and the sort of improvisational drama that would give Shakespeare a run for his doubloons. Now, let's set sail on the creaky decks of the fabled pirate ship, Sea Wasp, a name that promises both a sting and a bite, though the ship itself resembles a floating laundry line more than a fearsome vessel. Captain Bartholomew breaches. Twiddle is at the helm, and oh, what a captain he is. With a tri-cornered hat that's always a size too big, and a propensity for confusing navigation charts with menus from taverns he's visited, Captain Breeches is less of a terror on the high seas and more of a lovable seafaring uncle. Today, as luck and a non-existent plot would have it, the good captain has decided to honor tradition by declaring it Swab the Deck Day. This is met with a collective groan from the crew, because let's face it, pirates favor adventures where they chase treasures, not cleaning endeavors that chase dirt. Young Pip, fresh to the crew and grinning with optimism, reminds Breeches that it might be prudent to sponge off a few barnacles clinging to the hull for dear life. Laughing, Breeches dismisses Pip with a wave, insisting, "Son, barnacles are the sailor's true companion. Why, they might even know the sea better than we do." It's unclear if Breeches' logic is sound or simply salty. Madness, but aboard the Sea Wasp, both often sail side by side. Pirate life, though rowdy and ripe with the distinct scent of unwashed comradeship, wasn't without its culinary perks. Today's lunch consists of hardtack and what might generously be referred to as aged cheese that suspiciously resembles a small moldy cannonball. But food opinions are like the sea charting the unknown, diverse and open to interpretation. The crew eats with the enthusiasm of people who understand that fiery rum is often the easiest dessert. And while some may suggest this diet was less luxurious living and more living on the edge of scurvy, our dear pirates would argue that it built character and occasionally plaque. As supper waltzes into a discussion on the merits of the pirate code, a rather flexible set of guidelines rather than strict rules, the crew debates with the fervor of philosophers. One-Eyed Billy claims Article 11, which supposedly grants an additional ration of rum after a storm as his favorite. Little does he know, the actual Article 11 involves gloriously forgotten articles from the last plunder, usually of second-rate finery or the now infamous miscreant, the cabbage. And speaking of plunder, there's news from Lookout Eddie, high atop the crow's nest, who spotted a merchant ship on the horizon. This sets the Sea Wasp into action, which, for this crew, resembles a leisurely yet enthusiastic chortle over another well-worn adventure. Sails unfurl, the wind breathes life into billowing canvas, and as the good ship lurches forward, the Sea Wasp, our misunderstood guardian of the seven seas, aims for another guaranteed success. If success, of course, is measured in stories more than in gold. But just as the stars begin to wink from their velvet blanket, Captain Breeches pauses, pondering whether their course is set for treasure, or merely tangled yarns of delight. Perhaps he wonders if tomorrow might paint the story differently, or if it would simply bring more barnacles, and thus more company. As the spyglass closes and your eyelids grow heavy, the horizon awaits whatever comes next. For tomorrow on the open sea is as certain as the tides, infinite yet mysteriously new at every turn. Deep in your dreams, listen to the soft, rhythmical lull of the waves and drift into the night. Picture this, dear listeners, as the moon hovers over a vast ocean that looks like an endless, shimmering blanket. A salty blanket, I might add, one that a pirate would delight in swabbing daily, whether for cleanliness or just for the sheer rebellious joy of making a mop dance a jig at sea. Let us now wander into the slightly soggy boots of our protagonist, the reluctant but resourceful pirate, known only as Thaddeus, the Thinker. Now, Thaddeus was not your typical pirate. While others were busy fashioning fearsome names like Blackbeard or Calico Jack, Thaddeus chose to be known for his brain rather than his bravado, although, admittedly, a pirate's bravado was often as sizable as the very ships they sailed. You see, Thaddeus believed in a revolutionary idea that a pirate's might shouldn't be measured by the weight of the gold he plundered, but rather by the libraries he secretly pilfered along with it. Yes, our dear Thaddeus liked to tuck tomes away with his treasures, regarding the written word with the same gleeful glint one might reserve for a bottle of the finest rum. One can only imagine the sight on board the ship, the cogitating corsair, with its rows of books wedged between cannonballs, snuggled as comfortably as a cat in a sunbeam. The sound of rifling pages was nearly enough to outweigh the raucous sea shanties ringing through the air. Thaddeus would often remind his crew, "Remember, men, the most dangerous weapon is not the blade, but the book," to which his crew would reply with a scruffy chorus of, "Aye, aye, Captain," before returning to their less than highbrow exploits of swabbing decks and seizing ships. In those hazy days on the deep blue, one's day-to-day duties as a pirate were a curious mix of the routine and the ridiculous. Mornings might start with a brisk round of find the map, because predictably, the map was always missing, probably used as a makeshift tablecloth the night before. As the sun began its climb into the vast sky, pirates engaged in the noble sport of who can find the most treasure-like object in the captain's soup. Instructions: please ensure any doubloons lacking excessive barnacle buildup are returned to the treasure chest. Afternoons naturally led to the high drama of sea combat, where Thaddeus's penchant for words was once more a peculiar pirate power. Rather than simply firing the cannons, Thaddeus preferred to start engagements with a good parley, a word that to the uninformed sounds suspiciously like a refined pirate's way of arranging tea time. In his view, the key to a successful raid wasn't just about firing first, but getting your adversary to first appreciate the nuance of one's naval strategy, ideally by quoting a choice line from Sun Tzu's The Art of War, just as soon as they crested on the horizon. Evenings presented the opportunity for pirate philosophy. They said it was the rum talking, but Thaddeus swore it was the Enlightenment. Low-lit readings of new chapters from his growing collection were a sacred ritual. By the flickering glow of lanterns, flushed with ocean air and glowworms of contemplation, Thaddeus explained the finer points of Shakespeare to his motley crew. Admittedly, many adjusted their bandanas with a mix of intrigue and bewilderment as they grappled with his assertion that to plunder, perchance to dream, might indeed solve the age-old pirate quandary of why life at sea didn't involve a tad fewer barnacles and a bit more booty. So, as the night wind began to tangle itself in the riggings and the stars themselves seemed to blink sleepily at the tales being told below, Thaddeus and his crew discovered a simple truth. Be it the blade or the book, at the end of the day, the life of a pirate, dear listener, was all about the stories they could tell. And the stories they could spin were as endless as the sea on which they swayed. Close your eyes and allow those whispers of the waves to nudge you gently further along this dreamlike journey. Imagine where Thaddeus's peculiar voyage might lead next as the tide reluctantly kisses the ship's hull, and our next adventure softly unfurls on the horizon, in the languid twilight of a Caribbean evening, where the horizon seems to blend indistinguishably into the sea. Outsail the vessels of our swashbuckling friends, the pirates of the Golden Age. Imagine it now, dear listener, the wooden planks beneath their boots creaking in quiet protest against the salty breeze, and the fluttering Jolly Roger casting playful shadows on the deck. Let us set anchor here, in this peculiar world of pirates, still lulling in the embrace of the high seas for a gentle exploration of their surprisingly organized chaos of daily life. One might think the pirate lifestyle was a ceaseless riot, a rum-soaked sea dance involving sword fighting, treasure hunting, and the constant threat of walking the proverbial plank. But truth be told, the life on board was often governed by an oddly democratic set of rules known as the Pirate Code, a term that probably seemed more intimidating than it was, rather like signing up for a gym membership. Pirate captains, often as feared as they were adored, were elected by their crew. Yes, you heard that right, chosen by a popular vote. It appears even in the elastic world of pirating, democracy had its fleeting cameo. These seafaring adventurers had developed a proto-republic decades before the very concept gained traction on land. If only this nugget of wisdom was passed down to the future generations, tethered to their 9-to-5 routines. The crew wielded a novel form of AU checks and balances, a system delicately balanced on the captain's ability to keep his crew happy, fed, and preferably rich without any unwanted legal entanglements on the seas. Mutiny, after all, was just a politely whispered suggestion away. Hence, The captain was less a tyrant ruler and more akin to a weary manager trying to juggle employee satisfaction surveys with quarterly plundering targets. Now, as dusk lowers its sequined curtain over the ocean, let's delve deeper beyond the pirate captain's authority to the camaraderie of the crew, who by day managed the unsung tasks of seamanship and by night engaged in lively, folksal storytelling and possibly some interpretive sea shanties. From meticulously mending sails and rationing food to sharpening cutlasses while discussing the merits of mangoes over coconuts as the superior tropical fruit, each day was inked with responsibilities and the subtle art of doing absolutely nothing important, expertly. Surprisingly, piracy was not a career purely reliant on brawn. Oh, the biceps came in handy when hauling those oversized barrels of loot or fending off an irritated Spaniard, but wits and cunning were invaluable. The art of piracy was a strategic chess game played out on azure waters, where the pawns were often crates of plundered sugar, and the game often ended with a tactical retreat to a sun-dappled hideaway. Here's a morsel of trivia to stump your friends. Pirates were possibly the pioneers of workplace compensation. The Pirate Code outlined in no uncertain terms the compensation due to any pirate who lost a limb, or an eye, or perhaps the tip of a particularly chunky beard in active service. Today, we call this health insurance. Captain Blackbeard might have called it an impromptu hair loss prevention plan. As we drift further into this misty nautical narrative, let us remember that piracy, for all its chaos and caricature, was a nuanced society, brimming with its unwritten customs, whispered secrets, and the perpetual roar of the pushing tide. It seemed amidst the occasional cannonade and broadside banter, these sailors caroused not just for gold or glory, but for the exuberance of choice and a spirited life afloat on the billowing balcony of the world. And so, as the rhythm of the imagined sea softly wraps around you, cradling the mind into the tranquil recesses of rest, picture the tranquil ocean stretching endlessly, a place where adventure unfurled its sails and camaraderie echoed in the tranquil evening breeze, a world that awaits the next chapter of its storied saga. Dream away, dear voyager, as this playful journey into the pirate's world gently carries you into your own dreams. Imagine, if you will, a tranquil Caribbean evening. The sea is gently lapping against the side of a notorious pirate ship, named something only a pirate would find fearsome, like the terrifying turnip, or perhaps the fearless ferret. The crew, as colorful as a box of stolen parrot feathers, is bustling about, each with their unique role in this swashbuckling ballet. Here lies our setting, a place where salty sea dogs truly earned the title. The cook, for instance, a scrappy sailor who may or may not have been aptly named Blubber Bob, prided himself on his signature dish, sea predator stew. Now, this wasn't quite as jaw-droppingly fearsome as it sounds, given that most of the ingredients could usually be identified as any fish-like entity accidentally caught in a net with more serious prey, plus a medley of herbs that were less herbs and more an organized pile of whatever greenery one could find floating nearby. This was served with a side of hardtack, a kind of biscuit so sturdy you could theoretically use it as a lifeboat in dire emergencies. Now, let's ease into the dreamy rhythm of ship life. The pirate's day began not with the crowing of a rooster, a luxury confined to land, but with the call of the captain. A figure of flamboyance, the captain wore a hat so wide-brimmed you'd think it captured its own solar system of seafaring respect. Sporting a grin that stretched from ear to ear, some say it was an act of intimidation, others swore it was from secret consumption of imported sugar. The captain's daily announcements were a thing of marvel. Imagine waking up to the joyous tune of "Good morning, scallywags. Today, we pillage," a sentiment always sure to start the day on the right, peg-legged foot. Perhaps you're curious about the treasure maps. Oh, the glorious artistry. Most looked less like a roadmap to riches and more like an elementary schooler's interpretation of the cosmos. X marks the spot, unless of course it's a misplaced jam stain from breakfast. The real challenge was not in finding the location, but in decoding the so-called landmarks. Was that supposed to be a mountain or a smudge from an overzealous cartographer's lunch? Adventures awaited less in the treasures uncovered by these maps and more in the tales behind each successful expedition. The rhythm of the sea played like a lullaby, lulling both the ship and its crew into a steady hum of activity. High above, in the crow's nest, Frederick, the frequency confused, would belt out warnings about approaching ships, dolphins, or his personal imagined foe. A giant squid, perpetually lurking somewhere in the deep, simply biding its time. Frederick's penchant for tall tales was well known. The man could spin a yarn about two sails sighted on the horizon into a full-scale collision course with a fleet of gold-laden Spanish galleons. Evening drew close, beckoning with it a sense of camaraderie that was as palpable as the salty air. Pirates seated themselves around communal barrels, sharing exaggerated stories of their exploits, each version slightly more unbelievable than the last. "I fought off a kraken with nothing but a spoon," claimed one gentleman. Twirling said spoon heroically. "Quite right," another would respond. "But wasn't it also you who called for parley with a lighthouse last week?" Laughter would spill over the deck, mingling with the gentle splash of waves, treasure perhaps more cherished than any golden doubloon. As the sun lazily dipped below the gentle swells, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, one couldn't help but feel that for all their misdeeds, there was a peculiar charm in the life of a pirate. A peculiar charm that, much like the sea around them, felt both boundless and full of mystery. With the moon now casting its silvery glow, bathing the ship in soft, shimmering light, the pirates began to settle in for the night, their dreams as grandiose as their tales. And as you drift, much like those buccaneers on the open sea, allow the currents of slumber to guide you gently onward, through pages yet to be turned, to places as wondrous and whimsical as these. As the moon poured its silvery light over the infinite ocean waves, the gentle rocking of the sea cradled the HMS Delightful Dastard into the realm of pirate dreams. Tonight, our tale drifted to a golden era where swashbucklers roamed the Caribbean with pockets full of doubloons and hearts full of aspirations to one day own matching parrots. Life aboard a pirate ship was a peculiar cocktail, not of rum and seawater, as one might expect from seafaring buccaneers, but of camaraderie and chaos, spiced with an occasional dash of dental discomfort. You see, dental hygiene was not exactly a key focus on a pirate's resume. The occasional friendly mutiny aside, it was the lack of good toothpaste that really kept them up at night. For most days, dried sea biscuit and grog seemed a satisfactory combination until you had to chew on a hardtack biscuit baked last decade, which was more like gnawing on a small brick. Oh, hardtack, the unyielding canvas of their dietary misery, was a dubious delight. Its best trait, perhaps, was its ability to serve as both a meal and an impromptu weapon. Throw it, and you might injure an enemy. Eat it, and you might injure yourself. In fits of creativity, pirates would scribble poetic limericks on its surface with a rusty nail during particularly dull afternoons. How romantic to think that somewhere, deep in Davy Jones's locker, lies the world's oldest collection of edible poetry. But no tale of the high seas is complete without its mention of the one thing pirates held more dearly than their soulless shoes: the Jolly Roger. Ah, yes. Waving majestically atop the mast, the flag was a flamboyant fair warning. Much like a seafaring version of hiring a bouncer for a rowdy tavern, it assured that enemies and potential friends alike knew they met not an intellectually taxing book club, but a pride of plundering pirates. Interestingly, not all Jolly Rogers sported the infamous skull and crossbones. Creative captains chose motifs from an early Pinterest board of the damned, skeletons enjoying cocktails, swords through hearts, and occasionally inexplicably terrifying bunnies. Charming, wasn't it? The Jolly Roger was less about branding and more about setting a fashion trend on the expansive catwalk of the Caribbean Sea. Of course, A pirate's true treasure hunt was not for gold or jewels, but for a very specific sound. The tinkling giggle of a newly minted rumor. The ship's gossip chain was faster than a cannonball, and infinitely more lethal. Today's subject: Blackbeard's supposed discovery of a recipe for hair gel stronger than cannon resins. Finally, a solution to keep those briny locks in check during a tempest. Truth or no, this was a story fit for an uproarious sea shanty. Lulled by the tales, swayed by the sea, the pirates shared stories under the brilliant starlight, their voices weaving a tapestry of adventure and whimsical misadventure. The camaraderie among such colourful soul renegades was profound. These were not mere crew members, but confidants, co-conspirators in a caper of nautical nonsense. And so, as the ships sailed on, carried by the winds of the Caribbean night, the murmur of stories faded into silence, matched only by the soft splash of the waves against the hull. The chapter of this night closed softly, and their dreams began to unfurl once more, leading them towards the curious dawn of new possibilities to explore when next the sunshine coaxed them back into the world of the waking. But until that moment, the sea, the stories, and the enchantment of being a pirate rocked them gently, whispering promises of more delightful escapades to come. The waves knew of those tales yet untold, cradling both ship and souls in a lullaby as ancient as time itself. Ahoy, sleeper of the seven seas. As we drift deeper into the hushed recesses of our pirate dreams, let us cast our imaginations to one of the most peculiar and curiously essential aspects of pirate life, the delicate art of burying treasure. Yes, indeed, imagine this: a band of sunburned scallywags lugging chests of gleaming loot across sandy shores, only to promptly dig a hole and stash it away, as if pirates of old were moonlighting as avant-garde landscape architects or exceptionally paranoid squirrels. Though the notion may sound amusing, it was a little more method than madness. You see, the average pirate wasn't just a plunderer, he was also a practitioner of a peculiar form of financial planning, albeit with more maps and far fewer accountants. The romanticized idea of buried treasure has roots in reality, but with some historical spice. Let's delve gently into the history, shall we? It might surprise you to learn that burying treasure was not as universally rampant as Hollywood would have us believe. In the scandalous days of swashbuckling and swagger, many pirates preferred to spend or gamble their booty right away, embracing a lifestyle akin to an 18th century lottery winner on a never-ending weekend in Vegas. But then there were outliers, crafty captains who appreciated the value of deferred gratification. Pirates like Captain William Kidd allegedly buried his treasure as a last-ditch attempt to use it as a bargaining chip to save his own skin. A clever ploy, except it was less of a savvy financial move and more akin to lighting a signal flare to his exact location. He was captured and hanged, his treasure becoming the thing of law, the original lost and found. Not to be outdone, other captains chose strategic locations for their chests, places so obscured by nature's abundance that they became pirate ghost stories themselves. Forests filled with the haunting whispers of the rustling leaves, luring many an adventurer to shovels and spades with the hope of discovering riches. Each hunting expedition an unintended comedy of errors. But life on the high seas wasn't all about gold and elaborate scavenger hunts. Sometimes, deep in their salty hearts, pirates imagined a future, a distant dawn where they might sip coconut milk while lounging in a palm shadow, free from the merciless pursuit of navy ships. Such was the fantasy, a quiet retirement plan wrapped up in salty traditions and folktales. It's a bit like millennials today, buying houseplants and dreaming of coastal hideaways, only instead of Instagrammable succulents, there were, well, cutlasses and iffy dental plans. No matter the era or predicament, it seems every generation finds their form of comfort amidst chaos. For many, this era, the age of piracy, was wrapped in irony. Pirates were experts in finding treasure, yet lived lives lacking material luxury. After all, One cannot stuff a sail with coins, nor can a suitcase of doubloons buy immunity from scurvy. Their finances were as turbulent as the sea, each coin spent as quickly as the waves turn. Now, how does one wrap a day's worth of brigandry and plunder into a restful night's slumber, you ask? Perhaps it's all about perspective. For at the end of the day, or the chapter in our case, these pirates embarked on grand adventures, not unlike our dreamers. They followed the stars, told stories around flickering lantern light, and sometimes, just sometimes, stopped to smell the sea air perfumed by tropical blooms. And so, dear dreamer, as we gently drift towards softer winds, let us imagine the untold plains and adventures waiting on the horizon. Our story floats further into the moonlit night, perhaps towards an illuminated sea where folk of time-forgotten worries sail ever on, onward to greater mysteries, just like the ones we shall unravel as we set sail anew. Sweet maritime slumbers await. As the gentle waves rocked our sturdy vessel under the silvery glow of the moon, let's embark on another dreamy dive into the salt-sprayed world of piracy. Once upon a nautical nightmare filled with adventure, mischief, and the occasional poorly executed sea shanty, there lived a notoriously notorious pirate ship known as the Saucy Seagull. It was captained by the legendary, yet oddly elusive, Captain Drowsy Beard, named not just for his stylistically disheveled facial hair, but for his uncanny ability to fall asleep faster than a well-fed kitten at sea. Life aboard the Saucy Seagull was anything but a snooze fest for its crew. However, it diverged a tad from the typical pirate narrative. You see, Captain Drowsy Beard was pioneering a rather radical approach to piracy, partly by choice and partly from forgetfulness. The crew wasn't so much plundering treasures as engaging in a series of highly polite borrowings. They'd return a plundered ship's silverware once the cutlery-deprived captains lamented their inability to enjoy a post-dinner dessert gracefully. As storied and brave as the crew might have been, they were also armed with a singularly curious battle strategy: distraction. When attacking a ship, which they more often than not mistook for floating festivals due to lack of sleep, they'd rain feathers, sing serenades, and occasionally host impromptu pigeon races on the quarterdeck. Their reputation there wasn't driven by fear or ferocity, but by their bewildering, downright bizarre antics, which left many a navy baffled and chuckling helplessly into their tricorn hats. Among these rolling jesters was Nell Naptime Norton, an expert helmswoman whose greatest arcane compass consisted of sniffing the breeze to steer the Saucy Seagull into wayward directions based on utterly nonsensical logic. "Follow the scent of fortune," she insisted, and more often than not, they would end up within biscuit-tossing distance of a tea shop, a miraculous event indeed, considering they were leagues out at sea. The navigator, a particularly peculiarly dreaming parrot named Professor Polyglot, served as the crew's translator and mediator. He communicated in dreams, a crucial skill in resolving disputes over the last of the ship's biscuits or the prime sun-napping spot atop the crow's nest. The professor would squawk in protest if a spirit of hostility ever seeped into the salty, lazy camaraderie, thus ensuring that every crew member maintained a warm, cozy peace. The role of storytelling fell to Whispering Will, the sleepiest buccaneer who excelled not with weaponry, but with words. Each night, by the moonlit canvas of billowing sails, he'd regale the crew with tales spun from history that smoothly blended fact with fiction in the most delightfully drowsy manner, taking the edge off the wild sea adventure that was their life. This nightly ritual of his would rock them into a dreamy state, as they were convinced the moonlight itself danced more brightly when woven with fantastical yarns and hints of truth in equal measure. One such tale often revisited was the mysterious disappearance of the infamous pirate Captain Quagmire, who was said to have slipped into a yawning vortex while napping on deck. To this day, it is whispered among seabirds that one can hear Quagmire yawning when the sea is particularly calm, an enchanting echo of a dreamy duet offered by ocean and myth. As The fond retelling of Captain Quagmire's mysterious, snooze-induced vanishing drew to a close. The crew of the Saucy Seagull drifted into the silky embrace of sleep, their minds adrift on waves of whimsy, humor, and camaraderie. Tomorrow promised another stretch of their unpredictable journey, with new tales to explore and the horizon ever in sight. For tonight, though, they nestled under starry skies, their snores mingling with the breeze as we slide softly into our own restful reveries, perhaps to learn the mysterious art of sea-napping from Drowsy Beard himself. In the glow of the moon, as the sea whispered on calm, star-kissed nights, there would stand a figure both feared and admired, the pirate quartermaster. A position rivaled only by the captain, the quartermaster sported a role filled with nuances and quirks as bizarre yet integral as a parrot wearing an eye patch. Picture this Camelot on the high seas, if you will. Pirates navigating the laws of the swashbuckling world, with rules so democratic they'd put modern city councils to shame. Perfectly in line, of course, with the paradoxical chaos of life. Their system was indeed a model of organized disorder. It was the quartermaster who held the delicate scales of justice aboard, driving home disputes, settling chaos, and dividing the spoils of mischief and robbery like a fair-minded Santa Claus. You see, one might assume pirates ran their ships with savage abandon, but if the sea had taught them anything, it was the value of order, albeit a rum-splotched, sandal-wearing, leather-bound volume of order. This leather-bound volume included a charter that could, on occasion, get a tad muddled with spilled grog. The quartermaster interpreted these much like a modern judge interprets a particularly cryptic local ordinance. Atop their breezy duties, the mighty yet often peculiar quartermaster could also be considered the supreme arbiter of the sea's most important matters, namely food rationing and booty distribution. Yes, somewhere amidst the daring escapes and dramatic plundering, deep discussions were held over who got how much plum pudding, or whether Sam with the wooden leg could rightfully receive 2 shares for his extra effort in the chaos. The quartermaster also had an eye on discipline. While the myth of the 9-tailed cat, a gentle euphemism for whipping, often featured prominently, real life was more likely to involve verbal reprimands for petty offences, such as lascivious glaring at the deckhands or forgetting it was your turn to polish the cutlasses. In this shadowy world of treasure maps and hidden islands, disputes were as common as seagulls, and settlement usually fell on the quartermaster's shoulders. He stood as the shipboard Solomon, passing out justice, turning down disputes that were clearly just Tom and Harry, at it again over who snored louder. Let's not forget the excitement of land. How those ports glistened with promises of fresh food, warm beds, and the delightful opportunity to restock or, more importantly, rendezvous with people who possess far better dental hygiene. Shrewd barterers, the quartermasters played their part here too, stretching every piece of 8 as far as humanly possible, while feigning ignorance about the captain's new fascination with satin waistcoats. Economy scholars take note. Often, their decisions swung the fine line between fair division and impending mutiny. Too often, a balance beam walked with poised elegance, like an overly tall gentleman on a tightrope wearing oversized boots. Inevitably, the attention to detail, the weight of diplomat and dealer, inspired a respect that even the most fearsome of buccaneers had to nod to, albeit under shadow of night to hide embarrassment. Now, as you tuck yourself deeper into the cocoon of your cozy cotton seaship, imagine these intrepid souls, twinkling and toasting against the backdrop of the glittering night sky. Every decision, a story. Every journey, a chapter cradled in moonlight. Allow the gentle waves of the dreamy sea to lull you softly to the rhythm of the tides as you drift towards the next unsung ballad of pirate lore and life in the cozy cocoon of the Caribbean, where turquoise waves cradled secretive islands like whispered gossip. Pirates found themselves in a rather unique position. It was a place where parrots spoke more sense than politicians, and treasure maps bore uncanny resemblances to doodles of someone's aunt's muddy farm. You could say it was the golden age of piracy, but only if you were thinking of gold as a metaphor rather than something you could jingle in your pocket. Ah, to be a pirate in such a time. You see, being a pirate wasn't just about pillaging and plundering, though there was plenty of that, like a never-ending sale at the world's first aquatic flea market. It was, quite unexpectedly, a chance to master the art of improvisation. After all, piracy was simply organized chaos upon the high seas, with rules as flexible as a jellyfish doing yoga. In this chapter of their adventurous lives, pirates often found themselves pondering the finer details of maritime decor. Ships were more than mere vessels, they were traveling homes, and a well-adorned deck could really make or break the ambience when entertaining a hostage or two. And so, on clear nights when the moon caressed the ocean's waves, pirates could be found debating the merits of different skull and crossbones motifs over mugs of grog, which, truth be told, tasted like bottled indecision mixed with a hint of wet wood. The creativity didn't stop at interior design. Pirates were also the connoisseurs of flags, known as the Jolly Roger, which were raised to politely, and by politely I mean terrifyingly, inform other ships of their upcoming misfortunes. The flags varied widely, each telling its own story. Some bore fearsome skulls, others skeletons hoisting hourglasses, which seemed to suggest, your time's running out. Also, we're really into measuring sand. Now, the key to a successful pirate ship seldom lay in the captain's hat, parrot's eloquence, or even the amount of gold teeth worn per capita. Nay, it was in the crew's ability to outwit their counterparts. And what better way to achieve this than through the noble art of storytelling? These salty seafarers were expert yarn spinners. Sure, their stories might have started with factual basis, but very quickly, as with all good fish tales, they grew to include krakens making breakfast, mermaids giving unsolicited fashion advice, and Spanish galleons with cannons that doubled as garden fountains. And let's not forget the illustrious pirate code, which, much like the terms and conditions you quickly scroll past on any app today, was full of guidelines no one, quite frankly, intended to fully follow. But for the sake of appearances, it was adopted with feigned sincerity at gatherings over a barrel of rum. The pirate code ensured that everyone got their fair share of loot, except on Take Your Captain to Work Day, which even pirates recognized as needing special provisions. Life aboard a pirate ship was a balance of mayhem and mild civility. When not engaged in gallantly unlawful activities, the crew busied themselves with the timeless pirate tradition of gambling. Dice games were popular, as well as more nautical renditions like Who Can Tie This Knot Faster? And the particularly scandalous Whose Parrot Is Louder? Competition was fierce, and the stakes often questionable, like the last slice of moldy hardtack or a gently used eye patch. As the days unfurled like maps in the breeze, the pirates seamlessly blended their love for hubbub with the tranquility of the sea. Beneath the roar of the ocean, there was a rhythm to their existence, a balance between exhilaration and the calming vastness of open waters, where decisions floated as lightly as sea foam upon the waves. Thus, with pirates, swaying gently in their hammocks and the moon lighting a silver path over the brine, the story of life in those boisterous times gradually melted into the lull of a bedtime tale. Just the sort of tale where once upon a time isn't the end. It's merely a pause before the next grand adventure that awaits in the calm, mysterious heart of the ocean, wrapped up in whatever is to come at the next stroke of the storyteller's brush upon this tapestry of old world's charm. Picture the salty breeze lightly tickling your nose as you lounge in your pirate hammock. A surprisingly cozy spot considering it's suspended between two splintery masts on a vessel known more for its plundering than its luxury. It's another gentle starlit night on the high seas during the golden age of piracy. In these moments of serene calm, you'd almost forget that during daylight hours, your ship, humorously named something like the Soggy Chicken, the captain swears by its strategic significance, transforms into a hub of bustling piracy activity. Let's pause and consider your everyday ensemble, your pirate garb, a motley blend of stolen fineries and well-loved rags, is practically designed for a mellow touch of flair and a lot of swashbuckling comfort. A pair of those very boots, likely borrowed from a hapless noble with more money than sense, is propped up on a wooden barrel as you gaze out at the moonlit waves. They remind you of the ocean's rhythmic lullaby, an untamed backdrop to your unconventional life. The day-to-day diet aboard your floating fortress might make a royal cringe, but to you, salted meat and hardtack is nothing short of gourmet after a week at sea. You see, even pirates must cherish balance in their daily life, balancing on steady legs through the gentle rock and sway of the open sea. That is, indeed, no table manners needed when a sudden wave could send your meal airborne. Simply catch what you can, and hope today's catch of the day didn't high dive overboard. But beyond the meals, there's a deeper sharing of cultural bounties, as it is the stories and songs passed during the tedious stretches of travel that are the real feast. Cries of "Land ho!" interrupt these tales of daring adventures, so often embellished you wonder if half of them are a collective dream. You see, pirates are the true creative storytellers long before sitcom writers earned their keep. There's Cyril, the chatty sea cook who swears he single-handedly fended off a kraken using only a ladle and his uncooked gumbo. You find yourself wondering if the kraken endured the gumbo out of sheer curiosity or charitable pity. Sunrise heralds the era's version of a corporate staff meeting, divided amongst the hum of endless yawns, gruff laughter, and the clinking of tankards. Decisions are reached on which wealthy merchant ship might grace tomorrow's raid, spirits lifted high with promises of phantom gold. And just like the precision clockwork of organized chaos, each mate has their role, a cog in the machine of grand larceny and shared excitement. The camaraderie is real, however, and this is perhaps the magnetic charm of piracy. Everyone counts, from the seasoned captain whose quizzical methods baffle half the crew, yet succeed more often than not, to little Timmy, the spry lookout perched atop the crow's nest, who insists his age is counted not in years, but in narwhal sightings, escaped unscathed. As with any crew, there's a governance, a shared code among your motley ranks, which insists on some surprising ethical nuances, a pirate's code to ensure fair shares and fierce loyalty. Remember, despite the evening raids and commandeered booty, one must not indulge in too much theft among crewmates unless it involves the last piece of salted herring. In which case, let the negotiations begin. Just as the night strengthens its hold on the skies and your eyelids embrace the growing weight of sleep, you recall the island you left a week past. Somewhere along its sandy shores, an old Tortuga tortoise continues his solitary patrol, as wily and respected in his terrain as a fellow pirate upon his ship. It's a calming image you hold on to, like a secret anchor, tethering you to dreams uncharted. Your mind starts to drift deeper, soothed by the gentle rocking of the waves. As your foot brushes against your pirate hammock's fringe, you speculate on tomorrow's adventures, tales waiting just beyond the horizon. And tomorrow, you'll join the crew in laughter over breakfast as plans chart their way across the map of your next day's life on the open sea. For now, let the whispered winds guide you further into a realm of slumbering peace and ocean-misted dreams, in a world where eye patches were eyewear fashion statements of choice, and parrots made for the ideal shoulder accessory. The life of a pirate was not just about swashbuckling and treasure hunting. Indeed, there was much more to their salty tales on the high seas. Snuggle in, dear listener, as we set sail through the misty waters of history and uncover the secret life of pirates during their golden era, a time when the oceans were as alive with shanties as they were with seaweed. Imagine, if you will, the sheer delight of a pirate breakfast. A pirate's morning ritual was less about continental spreads and more about continental drift. Instead of croissants, they might tuck into hardtack biscuits, a culinary delight so rock-solid it was rumored Blackbeard once used one as a doorstop. These biscuits were stubbornly lasting, which made them perfect for a seafaring diet, but less perfect for anyone with the last remaining tooth in their head. Still paired with a cup of slightly fermented grog, lovingly referred to as oceanic chicory coffee, it was a meal to remember, or forget, depending on the quality of yesterday's catch and cook cod stew. And yet, as with any society, even floating ones, pirates had their own peculiars, rules and regulations, known as the Pirate Code. In reality, this was less of a code and more a loose collection of guidelines inscribed by someone with a creative interpretation of the law, or perhaps a particularly unruly parrot. Contrary to swashbuckling stereotypes, pirates valued democracy. Voting was strictly observed for all important decisions, from the loot division to the playlist for the weekly pirate jam sessions featuring such hits as Row, Row, Row Your Boat, Gently Capsize That Way, and Whale of a Time. One of the most esteemed traditions was the care of their ship. Pirate ships, the not-so-secret floating fortresses of loot and leisure, demanded constant maintenance. Real hands-on maritime DIY, where everyone, from the captain to the cabin boy, had to learn things like barnacle removal, the pirate equivalent of car waxing, and rat herding, for which no previous experience was required. Listening to the lull of the sea, painting the mast, a gentle, rhythmic sport, created an odd sense of serenity amid the chaos of mutiny plans and the occasional accidental cannon misfire. Then there came the issue of treasure maps. More often than not, pirate maps were less an infographic for buried treasure and more an excellent demonstration of the mapmaker's vivid imagination. X marks the spot, but which one? Some maps contained so many X's, they looked like an ill-fated tic-tac-toe tournament. Misinterpretation was always possible. It was not uncommon to dig up a patch of sand only to find not treasure, but yet another head-scratching riddle that suggested Bob from the East India Company might have been involved. Moving back to onboard politics could lead to seeing the captain, an exalted position, akin to a CEO with a cutlass. The captain, apart from being good at his job of not sinking the ship, had to excel at motivational speeches. Something along the lines of, "Think of those gold doubloons, lads," and not how Henry Overboard is apologizing to the sharks was considered top tier. Negotiation skills were also crucial. After all, no one wanted an international incident involving a misunderstood order of turn to port side being taken too seriously over a diplomatic brunch meeting with a passing Spanish galleon. As twilight casts its gentle glow over our tales, let's beckon your imagination toward rest. Imagine our woolly sailors, free spirits of the sea, tucking their calloused feet inside hammocks, gently swaying to the ocean's rhythm. The whisper of winds and waves spelling a lullaby to the stars above, with the moon as their constant, luminous compass. And soon, gently drifting further into the world where dreams sail beyond uncharted lands, we float onward. The salty tang of the sea and the sound of 1,000 ceramic mugs filled with grog clinking together in what could only be described as the pirate's version of a gentleman's toast. That, dear sleeper, is precisely how one might experience an evening aboard a pirate ship during the acclaimed golden age of piracy, a time where each sunset seemed painted with liquid gold and tales of treasure sparkled brighter than the stars. As the soft lull of waves cradled the tempest's roar, our featured pirate ship of tonight's dreamy expedition, the evening rituals began. These were not your usual run-of-the-mill mariner customs, mind you. No, these had been finely honed by weathered sea dogs who knew how to turn dull moments into legendary sea yarns. Imagine a rowdy group of swashbucklers settled around, some perched precariously on overturned rum barrels, others lounging on coils of rope. This ragtag band of seabound adventurers had just one rule for nightly gatherings: find a tail taller than the mast, or wake up on bilge duty. Tonight's raconteur is one Captain Bartholomew, the Whisper Blackbeard, not to be confused with his more infamous relative, Edward Teach. The Whisper earned his nickname, not because he spoke softly, but rather because, much like rumors themselves, if his stories got around, They seem to grow legs and sprint off into the wild realm of larger-than-life lore. Bartholomew leaned forward, his eyes glinting under the flickering glow of a lantern, and began spinning a yarn about mermaids, the most gracious of sea creatures. According to him, it was a widely known fact among trusty pirates that mermaids had an unparalleled penchant for games of chance. The captain told of a time when they docked on a secluded cove in the Caribbean, where he played a most intense game of dice with these aquatic sirens. And, wouldn't you know it, they were quite fond of winning seashell necklaces and navigational charts to the nearest treasure islands. Now, although this particular tale was met with guffaws and synchronized eye rolls, imagine salty sea captains losing to mermaids at their own game of chance. There was an undeniable magic in the way Bartholomew narrated it. Each word was an invitation to believe the improbable, to float gently on waves of imagination where the division between reality and fantasy faded as seamlessly as the horizon meets the sea. It's easy to see why listeners would sway along with their hammocks, not only from the gentle rocking of the ship, but also from the dizzying dreams spun each night. Dreams that perhaps, in other conditions, might lead to unsteady legs, but here in the world of the high seas, led only to adventurous slumber. So tender was the scene that even the most hardened pirate, one Arthur Ironhand, who once notably declared sleep a waste of perfectly good pillage-planning time, was seen leaning back, eyes closed, a soft snore betrayed by the occasional muttered negotiation in his slumber, possibly bartering with the spirited mermaids himself. As those below deck drifted into the misty harbors of their dreams, the sea whispered its own tales. It sang mysteries unknown, its waters glistening softly under the moon's watchful gaze. The ship swayed rhythmically, cradling dreams of treasure beyond reckoning, of laughter echoing across vast expanses of time, and of the gentle, tender camaraderie that binds pirates of yore to the young dreamers of today. And so the night deepened, wrapping its velvety blanket over each pirate who, despite their gruff exteriors, found solace and childlike wonder in the tales of possibilities beyond the horizon. With the morning still a misty promise on the edge of imagination, the only sounds were the sea's lullaby and the raspy hum of contented snores, as even Captain Bartholomew slumbered, perhaps dreaming of his next fantastical tale. As we too drift into our own nightly reverie, we pause in this peaceful cocoon, resting with the promise of more whispered secrets and golden dreams to come. As the moon cast its gentle glow over the undulating seas, Rockabye Rogue was nestled comfortably in his hammock aboard the jolly sloop, the Sea Slumber. It was an evening like any other during the golden era of piracy, a time when the salt-washed breeze carried both the whispers of legend and the scent of rum-soaked adventure. Tonight, the tales that drifted on the ocean breeze were all about a peculiar yet essential facet of pirate life, an alternative economy as creative as it was chaotic. Yes, dear dreamer, tonight we saunter straight into the thrilling tale of pirate economics. Now, when you imagine a pirate's loot, it's easy to picture chests spilling over with gold doubloons and jewels glistening like starlit nights. But here's the sleepy little secret. Pirate currency was often far less shimmering. During this infamous maritime epoch, coins minted in various corners of the world jangled in the pockets of sea dogs. Spanish pieces of 8 were favored, serving as the Bitcoin of the buccaneers, while a French livre here, a Dutch guilder there, completed the motley collection. But trust me, counting coins wasn't a buccaneer's favorite pastime. The pirate code, an unwritten oceanic honor system, encouraged barter and ingenuity over balancing bank ledgers. A cutlass here, a barrel of salted pork there, maybe toss in an exotic parrot for good measure. Pirates weren't just marauders, they were also shrewd traders, probable proof that even on the high seas, necessity is indeed the mother of invention. Consider this. Your typical pirate vessel might have been a floating warehouse of wonders, the likes of which would put your local flea market to shame. You'd start at the aroma corner, an eclectic mix of black market spices and salted fish, enough to make even the hardiest pirate chef re-evaluate what constituted as soup. Meandering past barrels of molasses, you'd find the aptly named baffling bobbins, a collection of mismatched, marvelous findings such as monocles without lenses, time-worn spyglasses, perfect for squinting at distant horizons, and hats so befuddled they thought they were baskets. Every successful raid would bolster this trove of treasures come transfer fund for a community that embraced its own egalitarian economic ingenuity. Shipwreck survivors, runaway sailors, and the occasional disgraced noble found a spot aboard pirate vessels bound together by shared plunder and possibilities that gleamed as brightly as fool's gold. Casting thoughts back to the sea slumber, it was easy to imagine the lively swagger of Quartermaster Jacques, renowned on deck for his laugh-inducing bartering skills. Jacques once famously traded a left-handed mug for a mapeless treasure chart, sheer transaction alchemy, equal parts curiosity and contrivance, impeccable only by pirate math. For within this arithmetic, the correct answer wasn't to calculate the precise value ascribed to items, but rather to craft a narrative steeped in the promise of fantastic quests fueled by such exchanges. Up in the crow's nest, young navigator Lily Hughes would peer, through a fisheye lens, once swapped for a North Sea sock, at distant shores for potential new rendezvous, serendipitous settings where aspiring pirates could capitalize on their loot-based lexicon. Oh, the symphony of haggles that played out on unnamed beaches as sails bobbed lazily in the ocean's embrace. Thus, tucked amidst this hypnotic dance of commerce and plunder, the quiet clink of coins and hum of negotiated dreams, the jolly sea slumber drifted. You see, there was rhythm in this strife, a comforting ebb and flow to untethered lives bound by ceaseless compromise, a world where piracy was only profitable because it dared to embrace chaos, creativity, and the courageous heartenings of new companionships. As Jacques polished his absurd mug and Lily mapped out imaginary horizons, a gentle hum of soft snores echoed from the cabins below, a choir of contented thieves harmonizing with the murmur of waves against wood. In this tired world, tender tales such as these carried both the weight of history and the buoyancy of dreams. So, as the night deepened and the stars tenderly scattered across the heavens, the sea slumber rocked quietly on the seas. The ocean sang its eternal lullaby, inviting its crew to drift softly into realms even pirates treasure most, the soothing sanctuary of sleep's embrace. As the crimson sun dipped lazily into the ocean's embrace, painting the sky in watercolors of fiery pinks and deep purples, our pirates found themselves anchored near a small island. The island was replete with more palm trees than pirates who ever bothered with counting their loot, and had a soft, sandy beach, perfect for inadvertently napping under the moonlight. Tonight was no ordinary night, though. Tonight was the reckoning of the rum, a ceremonial gathering known across the pirate world, akin to how folks from duller walks of life celebrate New Year's Eve, or when the office vending machine finally dispensed free snacks. You see, amid the chaotic lives of pillaging and swashbuckling, pirates actually had traditions, a secret society of sorts, if you will, where they shared tales taller than the tallest mast and songs louder than the mightiest of sea gales. The reckoning of the rum was not only a time for raucous revelry, but also crucial diplomacy. Nothing quite says, "Let's not stab each other," like ceremonial toasts with mugs of age-old grog. The scene was set on the island's copse, where palms whispered secrets to each other, and hammocks swayed gently, as though lulling themselves into sleep. Lanterns fastened to the wooden poles flickered like fireflies, engaging in some nightly confabulation. One could almost imagine these lanterns gossiping about who hid the rum cask topside last year, or which buccaneers singing made the seagulls practice new migration patterns. On this particular eve, the famed pirate Jolly Roger, not the flag, mind you, but the jovial human source of its notoriety, was holding court, with more than a dash of salt in his sea-weathered beard and a smile jolly enough to make a miser crack a grin. He regaled his listeners with stories of exploits, real and embellished alike. Such narratives always blended seamlessly, a kind of oral piratical tradition, one might say. As Roger recounted how he single-handedly convinced a king's entire regiment that his crew consisted of ghosts by cleverly deploying phosphorescent seaweed on their hats, the crowd erupted in laughter. Perhaps it wasn't the glowing hats alone, but rather the fervor with which Roger declared "boo" that convinced the regiment to flee. But such details were often smoothed over like the gentle tides lapping against that very island's shore. One halfway through his anecdotal barrage, Roger paused, cupped his grog with the gravity one might reserve for holding the globe, and turned toward the shimmering horizon, saying, "And that's why we always carry spare seaweed aboard." A collective laugh rippled through the crowd like a wave, accompanied by playful elbow nudges and a few raucous guffaws, with one listener exclaiming, "Aye, and a brave captain knows it's eels, not ale, that scare off the navy." Exuberance bubbled like the brew in their barrels as new tales unfurled, each seemingly outdoing the last. Meanwhile, the melodic strumming of a well-loved lute added yet another layer to the festivities, harmonizing with the crackle pop of the bonfire. The sound of tankards clinking, a universal song of merrymaking, filled the cool night air. But it wasn't all laughter and song. Strange how a tapestry of boisterous camaraderie could weave in heartfelt yearning. As another story unfolded, quieter conversations hummed softly beneath. The murmurs of a pirate missing the feel of solid land under crewless feet, the sigh of longing for a beloved resting much too far away, or dreams of another adventure that glittered just beyond the horizon, waiting to be seized come dawn. As the night deepened, these dreamers and schemers, rogues and raconteurs began to settle into their hammocks and makeshift beds upon the sand, with the comforting knowledge that even they needed their beauty sleep. After all, a fabled pirate's life was nothing without the legendary swagger it required each morning. And so, with the embers fading into ash and the last stories whispering into the ears of slumber, the island sighed itself to sleep under the watchful eyes of constellations, a map penned by the hands of the universe, guiding them toward new horizons they'd one day chart. As the night kissed the waves goodnight, our story finds its pause, the pirates drifting off into dreams as wondrous as any treasure map. With tales told anew and spirits high, the dawn would bring another chapter of this grand maritime tale, adventures aplenty as the open sea awaited to cradle their next voyage. But for now, dear listener, we too find a restful silence, cocooned in dreams and swayed by the lullaby of the ocean, ushering in the promise of stories yet to unfold. The mysterious allure of the pirate's life, that eternal quest for freedom upon the high seas. We find our swashbuckling friends this time around patrolling the sapphire-tinted waters of the Caribbean, so calm and welcoming that even the seagulls seem to glide in slow motion. It's under these typically tranquil skies that our band of merry sea ruffians are engaged in their peculiar brand of capitalism, pirate-style bartering and trading. By the 17th chapter in our dreamy voyage, one might imagine these pirates had been shaped solely by the rough edges of rum barrels and saltwater. But alas, as peculiar as it might sound for a gaggle of sea thieves, organization and order drove the pirate life. Welcome now to the peculiar world of the Pirate Code, a set of rules that managed to be quite literally more popular than the Jolly Roger itself. Captain Morgan, not the rum, mind you, but the man whose spirit distilled much of piracy into flamboyant bottle form, insisted on a pirate code. And though you might think it was a bit of stuffy behavior for scallywags, these maritime legal tidbits were indispensably brave, like a parrot that dons a modest pair of spectacles to better read maps. These codes were designed not only to share the spoils of an uncertain and chaotic world, but also to make sure everyone knew when it was their turn to scrub the deck. No one was above the mop, or, heaven forbid, the plank, especially if they dared to snore too loudly in the captain's sleeping quarters. Picture the deck of a pirate ship at night, alight with flickering oil lamps casting their golden glow across weathered timbers. On such an occasion, curiously rowdy as always, but edified by the evening nip of rum, our pirate friends would gather to refurbish or refine their code. The strong-willed voice of the quartermaster, both judge and custodian of fairness, would project through the night air like a majestic sea, breeze carrying tales of adventure and bumbling broadside misses. Consider the key tenets of pirate democracy for a moment. First, there was the matter of the articles, a crucial document in an age where literacy among pirates was a bit like rain at sea, expected yet taken for granted only on occasion. These article evenings often led to heated debates that required the intervention of strategic glares, raised eyebrows, and the occasional informal consensus over the limited availability of coconuts. Much like a spirited game of chess with a very cranky parrot, pirate arrivals and departures were heavily regulated. Mutiny, after all, could so easily accompany an unwanted downward step towards Davy Jones's legendary, if not quite realistically reachable, locker. Loot was divvied with generous portions going to the injured. Who knew sustaining an occasional unfortunate cannonball to one's shoulder would transform you into royalty among rogues? There was even the noble title of musicians, a crew favorite, and these melodious souls were never to be disturbed, lest one face the dreaded punishment of being without shanty for the next raid. The hum of a fiddle or the beat of a drum kept spirits buoyant, even when the skies threatened with ominous dark clouds on the horizon. And in perhaps the most democratic of pirate practices, the captain was elected by the crew, with re-elections at a whim, just like picking coconuts, if coconuts had both good and bad hair days. Piratical leadership was truly at the mercy of the crew's fluctuating favor, proving that humility was their true compass, guiding even the most tempestuous souls. This chapter of the pirate story unwinds with a twinkle in your eye, a dose of seawater in your imagination, and a dreamy sense of rudderless peace as you drift through the murky mysteries of the high seas. Each rule and riot, each cunning stratagem, and every clattering crew meeting just a whisper in the endless song of the sea. And, as the night's curtain gently drapes over the horizon, we leave this dreamy world of chartered freedom to explore the forthcoming dawn of yet another adventure. Can you hear the sound of the waves gently lapping at your imagination, as if tenderly coaxing on the next tale? Ah, the life of a pirate. It's gloriously romantic, isn't it? The freedom of the open seas, the camaraderie of salty companions, and, of course, the undeniable appeal of those stylish eye patches. But the day-to-day existence of a buccaneer during the golden age of piracy was a bit more complex than the treasure-hunting tales might let on, especially when it came to leisure time, those rare moments when the infamous Jolly Roger wasn't flying high. Imagine, if you will, a gentle lull in the high seas. No unsuspecting trade ships on the horizon, no cannons blazing or swashbuckling to be had. What did these notorious sea dogs do when they weren't bounding across the decks, swinging cutlasses or stealing plunder from their equally maritime victims? The answer, dear listener, will delight your historical humor bone. Picture, if you will, a pirate sitting on the deck, knitting. Yes, knitting. It turns out that many pirates were surprisingly adept at their needles, creating their own shirts, socks, and if they fancied a touch of luxury or color, a new bandana. It was both practical and calming, a chance to let their minds wander while their hands worked the yarn into something vaguely respectable. Knitting had its practical purposes, much like their drinking habits, which were perhaps less for leisure and more for necessity. You see, contrary to the romantic notion of men constantly swigging rum like it were the nectar of the gods, pirates often consumed it because, frankly, the water wasn't always safe. With scant filtration and far too much reliance on barrels that had seen their fair share of mold, a shot of rum was just what was needed to make the water, let's say, more palatable. Entertainment aboard a pirate ship came in many vibrant forms. For instance, many a notorious brigand fancied himself a master musician after a few too many swigs of the so-called grog. Flutes, fiddles, and even the humble drum were popular choices, as these instruments could withstand the damp and salty environment. Just imagine the dulcet tones of a drunken sea shanty spreading across the deck as the sun dips beneath the horizon. Let's not forget that while pirates were indeed scoundrels of the seas, they were also often social creatures with a penchant for games. Anything from dice to card games to more localized amusements like cannonball rolling. A truly legendary pastime involved a game called Who Can Capture the Flag on a makeshift playing field, undoubtedly with grand predictions of infamy and the occasional brawl breaking out over whether or not someone had cheated. Yet, in this age of no small degree of violence, pirates occasionally turned philosophical during their downtime. It wasn't entirely uncommon for discussions to break out on liberty and governance. After all, being part of a pirate crew was a curious exercise in democracy. Crews often shared loot equally, voted on important decisions, and even selected their own captains. It was a motley form of egalitarianism that could, and often did, lead to animated debates over an otherwise ordinary evening meal. Possibly the world's first seagoing political salons. Now imagine this moment of intellectual leisure, punctuated by a little light treasure map making, naval cartography wrapped in optimism. Sitting beneath a sky scattered with a glittering spray of stars, perhaps a scruffy buccaneer thought about more than mere gold. Possibly, though quietly, as not to disrupt the image of greedy raiders of the deep blue, some pirates might have doodled small sketches of home or dreamed of a world away from the creaking boards of their overcrowded ships. And so, as a gentle sea breeze rocks our weary pirate to sleep, he dreams of golden horizons, a tomorrow filled with both peril and promise, one more tale in the ever-shifting tapestry of his wayfaring life. With the soft whisper of waves against the hull, the air filled with a murmured lullaby of the ocean, we drift into the mysteries of sleep, leaving the swashbuckling maneuvers for another day. But worry not, dear listener, as the sea holds more secrets than could ever be told in one night. Let your dreams set sail on the open waters, as the pirates of old find new adventures in the dreamy haze just beyond the reach of consciousness. Until our next encounter, where more tales and perhaps some more rum will be spilt. Ah, where were we? Ah, yes, nestled snugly within the heart of the Caribbean, beneath a sky freckled with a silvery dusting of stars, the pirate crew found themselves in a curious conundrum. In the world of high sea thievery during the golden age of piracy, there existed a code, a guide, if you will, that governed the somewhat roguish decorum of these nautical ne'er-do-wells. But what exactly did this pirate code entail, you may ask? Fear not, for as we sway gently on this lullaby of waves, let us unravel this curious tapestry of buccaneer bureaucracy. Picture this, a sunrise seeping honey across the waves, revealing a rather official-looking scroll unfurling amidst the accusative squawks of seagulls. Not quite the air of law and order that one might expect, yet therein lay the guidelines that held sway over pirates such as the infamous Edward Blackbeard Teach and the legendary Anne Bonny. The code was, in essence, a glorified list of rules, charmingly simple, yet strangely effective. These blazing swashbucklers harbored an inexhaustible need for balance amidst their chaotic boarding parties and secret stashes of grog. The first article most certainly dictated that every pirate should be able to do at least one sea shanty upon demand. You see, a sea shanty was not merely a tuneful escape from the monotony of sailing. It was a binding factor, uniting the crew in verses that celebrated both the joys of the sea and a life lived with little assurance of tomorrow. Imagine the scene, a roguish filibuster with a parrot perched haughtily on his shoulder, belting out tunes that spoke of chests filled with doubloons and the occasional mischievous mermaid. Then came the matter of democracy, a paradigm far ahead of its time. Pirates, those rapscallions, elected their captains. Yes, you heard correctly. They voted in a ceremonious manner that stood stark opposite to the autocratic maritime traditions of the time. Each pirate had a voice, a muffled, grumbling voice that often needed the amplification of a pint of rum. Captains were not by divine right nor familial ties. but elected based on their meritorious knack for adventure, and notably persuasive way, with words, perhaps reminiscent of your favorite uncle after a glass or two at festive dinners. Furthermore, disputes amongst pirates occasionally led to what one might call duels, which were ironically more akin to melodramatic theatre than actual combat. They were settled by pistol or sword, but always with a due nod to sportsmanship. Away with bloodshed, these duels often concluded with the victor buying a round for the unfortunate vanquished, though no less determined to pursue future disagreements with equal zest. We mustn't overlook the enigmatic life of a quartermaster. Equal parts accountant, diplomat, and morale officer. A quartermaster ensured fair shares of plunder, rationed unwanted healthy provisions, and crucially, decided which sea tales got the most fire-lit retellings. In essence, they were the pirate equivalency of your slightly frazzled HR manager on a Monday morning, ensuring disputes ended with no severed limbs and everyone's pillow talk remained buoyant. And lastly, without forgetting our dear pirate pets, a motley collection of parrots and monkeys. They were as much part of the crew as any seasoned sailor, even auxiliary in a good many negotiations at port. Imagine a monkey holding a boarding axe. Yes, even you couldn't say no to those furry, persuasive eyes. As the Caribbean breeze gently kisses the sails tonight, the moon winks down conspiratorially, while our pirate companions drift lazily into imagination's embrace, dreaming perhaps of adventure or simply the taste of the morning's hardtack that somehow never improved. Oh, was that a sigh from the cabin below? Perhaps our journey into Chapter 20 will reveal what dreams may yet captivate their hearts as night ebbs slowly towards dawn. For now, dear traveler, let yourself drift into dreams as soft as the whispering waves, as the gentle moonlight danced across the ocean's blanket. Our merry band of misfit marauders found themselves aboard the infamous Black Squid, a ship whose reputation glistened nearly as brightly as the polished cannonballs that sat cozily in its belly. The seas, in the 17th century, were plenty with ships, spices, and letters to one's true love, each bobbing about with hope, mischief, or a slight tinge of salt. A pirate's life was, you see, a symphony scored with the sounds of creaking wood, the swish of a well-aimed cutlass, and the occasional sea shanty sung terribly off-key. This motley crew was blessed with a night watchman named Reginald the Regrettable, whose claims to fame included falling asleep near the crow's nest and being easily distracted by star constellations he swore he invented, as if Orion's belt were some discovery of his own making. Now, while Reginald pointed out the three-eyed fish constellation to anyone not fast enough to escape his storytelling clutches, the rest of the crew was knee-deep in a game of spoils and plunder, an offbeat cousin to poker, which involved more bluffing and fewer rules. Captain Margot Blackbeard, who quite humorously lacked the eponymous facial hair, led the game, with the strategic brilliance you'd expect from someone navigating both treacherous waters and a crew resistant to following directions. One might wonder what a day in the life aboard such a vessel involved beyond card games and celestial musings. At this very hour, Pierre the Pungent, aptly named for his profound aversion to anything resembling soap, was busy trying to barter with Patrick the particularly persnickety for his last salted herring. It was a negotiation game of legendary proportions, a bit like trading a chocolate bar for a shiny rock. To make life aboard even cozier, Simon the Slightly Smelly, our allegedly seasick cook, was tasked with crafting dishes that were as savory as they were unidentifiable. Tonight's culinary masterpiece, a stew that would put hair on your chest and raise questions about what precisely went into it. The secret, Simon would say, was stirring until you forget exactly what you were making and just embrace the soup as it is. Meanwhile, in the captain's quarters, Captain Margot unfurled a curious map that was rumored to lead to an unseen treasure, a hidden isle reportedly teeming with doubloons and, perhaps more valuably, a patch of furiously misunderstood blueberry bushes which were said to ward off scurvy and any sense of taste. The allure was not gold, but the promise of vitamins. The air was crisp with excitement as the crew set their course for this mysterious gem of the sea. Captain Margot, adopting her most authoritative tone, announced with grandeur, "Onward to the blueberries," said with such conviction that you might suspect they were indeed the finest culinary acquisition history ever knew. Dreamily, the black squid glided through silken waters, each ripple a lullaby coaxing even the most stubborn of insomniacs into slumber. It was on evenings like this, suspended between adventure and repose, that the essence of piracy came into focus. There was beauty in the freedom of the sea, in the chaos of companionship, and in the endless quest for treasures both tangible and absurd. As the ship sailed onward, bathed in the silver luminescence of the night sky, each pirate nestled into their hammock with dreams as thick and comforting as the best rum. Out there, beyond the watercolor horizon, lay the next chapter of their audacious odyssey, a continuation that promised shenanigans, shipwrecks, and perhaps an entirely new constellation discovered by Reginald's sleepy imagination. And so they drifted into dreams, rocking gently with the rhythm of the waves as one day melted into the promise of what lay ahead. Ah, the life of a pirate in the golden era, a time when the vast, untamed seas were the playing fields of notorious brigands with names as colorful and infamous as their deeds. Let's unfurl our sails and drift into the whimsical and, dare I say, slightly ridiculous world of early 18th century piracy. Picture yourself, a pirate basking under a velvety canopy of twinkling stars. The ship gently rocks beneath your feet, and the salty breeze tickles your nose with the scent of adventure and maybe a hint of questionable hygiene. By the way, bathing was quite the treasure hunt, with many pirates utterly convinced that a bit of grime only added to their fearsome aura. The pirate code, an assortment of rules and guidelines, was the unwritten law of the sea. Famously captured on parchment by Captain Bartholomew Roberts, it was a bit like the world's first employee manual, minus the HR department and annual reviews. On the bright side, there was plenty of booty to go around when you abided by these laws. Or so the theory went. And yes, the equal distribution of plunder meant that everyone had more than enough gold coins for all the rum a liver could endure. In the spirit of true democracy, sans ballots, but with a handy cutlass, you, as a pirate, could vote on matters of great importance, like deciding whether you'd terrorize the Spanish Main another week or throw an impromptu pirate dance party on the deck. But all this freedom came with its quirks. Care for an extra helping of punishment with your daily grog? Piracy was rife with peculiar penalties for missteps. Walking the plank wasn't as common as Hollywood suggests, but there was something delightfully disciplinarian about being marooned, a practice where the offender was left with only a bottle of rum and possibly a half-working banjo to fend off madness on a deserted island. Meanwhile, feasting, when not interrupted by naval skirmishes or bouts of sea madness, was a hearty affair. Rations generally included biscuits, preferably the rock-hard variety known affectionately as hardtack, often infested with weevils. Don't worry, the extra protein was considered a delicacy, and, let's face it, you'd almost miss the critters during a long, monotonous journey. And speaking of diet, let's highlight everyone's favorite pirate affliction, scurvy, a vitamin C deficiency that bestowed a certain charm upon the toothless pirate grin. Not to worry, though. Eventually, enterprising souls figured out that citrus fruit was the real buried treasure, saving future pirates from gums as soft as their penchant for pillaging. Let's not forget the sartorial elegance pirates sashayed into town with. You were the king of Clashville, with a wardrobe ensuring every day was bring-your-own-fashion disaster day. The ensemble consisted of flamboyant, somewhat moth-eaten pants, vibrant sashes, and of course, the quintessential tricorn hat, a veritable pirate crown that accented every outfit. Should it have a feather, you might ask? Absolutely. The feather both said, "I'm practically aristocracy," and "Am I hiding poultry in my hat?" at the same time. But it wasn't all roguery and rags. Pirates also practiced democracy at sea and were known to take care of their own. Pirate crews often included sailors from different backgrounds, nationalities, and even former slaves, and outcasts, creating a rather diverse workplace. For all their lawlessness on the high seas, many pirates upheld surprisingly progressive principles, like granting equal spoils and even compensating for injuries, a sort of primitive insurance plan that, payment anomaly aside, saw a wooden leg or a hook as proof of one's eligibility. Now, as the moonlight dances across the swelling waves and your eyelids begin to droop, rest easy, knowing that the life of a pirate, as perilous as it was zany, always had that hint of camaraderie and shared adventure, traits that make even the most perilous tides seem navigable. As another breeze helps your ship drift onward, dream sweetly of gold doubloons and gently bobbing hammocks, and prepare your mind to sail into yet another voyage of whimsical history. Imagine, if you will, a moonlit ocean with waves gently lapping against the hull of a pirate ship. There you are, our dreamy voyager, standing on deck under a blanket of stars. The salty sea breeze brushes against your face, carrying with it the faint echoes of laughter and song from a time when parrots spoke in curse words and gold coins weren't for banks, but for flamboyant coatings on the captain's hat. In the golden era of piracy, life could be dazzlingly adventurous, if not fraught with certain inconveniences, like the lack of Wi-Fi. Nautical know-how was critical, and every good pirate knew their knots, if only to properly tie enemies to the mast for a thorough earful of pirate shanties, truly the original Sea Spotify playlists. But you, dear listener, would have fit right in, finding contentedness among the rustling sails and a shipboard dog, perhaps wearing a tiny tricorn hat. The life of a pirate was surprisingly regimented, with ships operating by codes far more stylish than your average workplace handbook. The pirate code wasn't penned in the HR-friendly margins of a spreadsheet, but etched into pirates' hearts, sometimes literally tattooed. You didn't want to be found violating the code, unless you fancied the idea of feeding the fishes or being marooned on an island with only a musical crab for company. And speaking of companions, the pirate's ship was often a floating menagerie. A motley crew of misfits and miscreants came together with a single ambition: to seize the day and the treasure. Now, throw in some chickens, cats, and perhaps the occasional monkey, because what's a ship without chaos? And your lovely vessel begins to sound more like a crowded amusement park than a fearsome pirate brig. Let's not forget the captivating characters like Anne Bonny, who brandished both fearsome ferocity and fabulous flair. She was the original trailblazer, often noted for teaching the seas more about gender equality than bushels of pamphlets ever could. Or take Blackbeard, whose marketing skills were second to none. Setting fire to your beard to terrify adversaries is indeed one pyrotechnically bold way of handling negotiations. His presence promised action scenes worthy of a Hollywood blockbuster, complete with smoke and dramatic lighting. An impressive feat for someone without a special effects team. Mealtime was another time-honored tradition, albeit a tad less Instagram-worthy. Pirate grub was, well, far from Michelin-starred fare. Hardtack was a dietary staple, a jaw-breaking biscuit with a shelf life rivaling immortality itself. Though, if you were lucky, the occasional haul of fresh provisions meant a hearty meal of salted meat and maybe even rum, an old pirate's best friend when dental plans weren't at hand. Now, don't drift away just yet, dear dreamer. Pause to listen to the haunting strains of a distant accordion, the notes drifting lazily across the ocean's mirrored surface. Perhaps you think on what truly drove these sea dogs: adventure, rebellion, freedom, or simply avoiding the 9-to-5 landlocked grind. Piracy was as much about personal liberation as it was about procuring Portuguese gold. And perhaps, in their nocturnal voyages under a canopy of celestial wonders, the pirates of yore dreamt not of treasure chests, but of the stories etched into the constellations above. As the horizon whispers goodnight to the departing sun, settle into your hammock, gently swaying with the ship. The world of pirates is painted not just with splashes of adventure, but also with the soulful, sleepy hum of the sea itself. So allow yourself to drift with the waves, letting the stories of daring buccaneers sing you softly to a land where dreams sail unhindered. Who knows what tomorrows you'll uncover on this maritime journey as we chart course towards the next chapter, where the sea continues to tell all. As the soft rumblings of the ocean cradled our weary pirate souls, and the moon cast its silvery glow across the inky black sea, you might wonder in your drifting thoughts how these roguish sea folk managed to spend their plundering days without losing their very sanity. Well, dear listener, let's delve gently into the curious rituals and odd antics of a pirate's leisure time during the golden age of piracy, a time when even the most unruly of buccaneers would seek some semblance of solace amid their rollicking mayhem. Picture the pirate vessel as a floating world unto itself, with decks teetering under the weight of cannonballs, rum barrels, and a highly suspect parrot or two. In between swashbuckling escapades and treasure divining expeditions, pirates found themselves with the curious challenge of how to while away the hours when no ships or storms were in immediate pursuit. Enter the charmingly simple joys of pirate pastimes. Pirates, despite being notorious for their belligerence and avarice, were quite the board game enthusiasts. The game of Nine Men's Morris was a stalwart favorite, played with stones on a scratched-out board, a more analog affair than your latest mobile app, but no less fiercely competitive. Picture two scallywags face off by lantern light, their faces scrunched in concentration as they maneuver their pebbles strategically, each hoping to achieve the elusive mill and best their shipmate, preferably without losing a finger to any penalizing sword for losing. And what of the fiddle? No pirate worth his earring could escape the call of a raucous sea shanty. When the wind calmed and the horizon turned languidly pink, it was time for music. The fiddle strings would shiver into life, often accompanied by a makeshift percussion of barrels and crates. Anthemic ditties about rum, bounty, and the ever-elusive freedom would coax reluctant smiles and the clumsy shuffling of feet. Perhaps it was these sea shanties, with their hypnotic harmonies and rollicking rhythms, that were the true glue of camaraderie among a crew so used to scrapping over spoils and fistfights. But even when feet needed rest, the mouths found their entertainment in the art of storytelling. Ah yes, the oral traditions of pirates were second only to their love of rum. Tales of the sea, exaggerated with each telling, grew grander and more thrilling. With each retelling, mermaids became more persuasive, storms more ferocious, and the legendary kraken anywhere from the size of a longboat to a small island depending on the teller's mood, or the rum's effect. These stories were a pirate's Netflix, delivered in breathless spurts around dimly lit gatherings. Should you find these tales of leisure beguiling or improbable, remember, dear dreamer, that pirates were but humans with a penchant for adventure and mischief. And like all men and women of seafaring ilk, they sought warmth and laughter amidst the ever-lurking gales of unpredictability haunting the ocean waves. As your thoughts slip slowly and gently away, imagine these bygone buccaneers lulled to sleep in their hammocks as the schooner rocked in the cradle of the sea, their aspirations as vast as the horizon, their realities as immediate as the sunrise to come. And let us drift onward towards the closing act of this high sea journey, where the promise of one final tale yet remains, gently waiting just beyond the whispered promise of a night's rest, as we drift into the final chapter of this bedtime tale. The sea, our perennial companion, remains calm under a serene blanket of stars, offering a gentle lullaby that carries our swashbuckling heroes toward uncharted territory, the end of the golden age of piracy. Imagine, if you will, the moonlight dancing on the waves as if Neptune himself were hosting a farewell ball for his favorite seafaring rogues. Now, while our beloved pirates were beginning to hang up their hats and cutlasses, an unexpected transformation was taking place on shore. The very empires that had spent endless coin and breath railing against piracy suddenly found a peculiar nostalgia for these marauders of the high seas. Like an uncle who, despite your wild teenage years, always found your escapades charming at reunions, the world began to romanticize pirates. The scallywags who once danced with death over coffers of Spanish doubloons became legendary folk heroes, cherished more in memory than they ever were in reality. Our loyal friends, Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and Bonnie, to name a few, had sailed through calamitous storms only to find their stories rewritten into swashbuckling legends rife with misunderstood anti-heroes and daring escapades. Reality had been varnished with a fetching layer of myth and song, much like polyurethane transforms a mundane wooden deck into a rather presentable veranda. Treasure, as any buccaneer will cheekily confess over rum, assumes different forms to different pirates. Some seek riches in gold and pearls, others in rum-soaked camaraderie or the thrill of outsmarting the crown's men. In the end, our spirited seafarers concluded their escapades with the realization that the true treasure was the friends they made, and indeed, occasionally marooned along the way. Landlubbers who had once screamed for their heads couldn't resist a good story and began turning these rogues into caricatured heroes. Broadsides and pamphlets, the Twitter of the 18th century, spun romanticized yarns more colorful than a parrot in a paint factory, each tale swaying even the most skeptical souls. The legend of piracy, with its audacious narratives and unyielding spirit of rebellion, was not just the stuff of bedtime tales, but echoed centuries forward into the hearts of dreamers and adventurers alike. As the candle of the golden age was snuffed out by the winds of inevitability, one might wonder where all the mischief makers ended up. Were they really gone? Or had they merely exchanged their ships for other vessels of fortune, perhaps in the coffee salons of London or the libraries of Boston? Still, watch closely, and you might just see a twinkle in the eyes of that old sailor by the docks, or catch a hint of a roguish grin from the retired shopkeeper whose past might not have been as pedestrian as he lets on. The spirit of piracy did not retire. It chose to dwell in the whispers of the wind and the tales that make our imagination set sail on nights just like this. And so, dear listener, we reach the tranquil end of our voyage through a time when the world was wide and the horizon endless. The bedtime ceiling above, decorated with sprinkles of starlight, promises dreams composed of forgotten seas and hidden harbors. May your slumber be as deep as the Pacific, and your dreams as vivid as a Caribbean sunrise, filled with tales as adventurous as those spun tonight. The stories of daring jewels and treasures, both lost and found, inevitably fade into gentle waves of sleep. Tomorrow, perhaps, these echoes of a pirate's life will mesmerize another dreamer, another seeker of stories, ready to chart a daring course across the adventures of dreams. Good night, brave dreamer. The seas and stars await your imagination when next you awake. Until then, may the gentle rhythm of the tides cradle you in peace, and the whispered songs of the sea breeze see you safely on your voyage into slumber. Sweet dreams.